White oppressive forces have done such a thorough job at distorting the minds of our people that trying to teach the truth to our people can feel literally as challenging as spitting against strong wind. But nonetheless, those who know must teach. African proverb. Nowadays, millions of black people puts more emphasis on their tennis shoes than they do the thought of black liberation. It's very often that whenever the subject of black liberation is now mentioned, millions of black people literally becomes irritated by the subject and will respond by saying that they don't want to hear that black shit. Millions of black people literally describes black liberation as that black shit. This is a direct contrast from the unprecedented black liberation movement of the 1960s. This change within the black population that clearly benefits the white society is by deliberate social engineering of the black population. The common response of, I don't want to hear that black shit whenever the subject of black liberation is mentioned is actually a programmed response. Millions of black people have been programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. It's always by deliberate design whenever the oppressed starts thinking and behavior in ways that benefits the oppressed. Always. It's always by deliberate design when the minds of the oppressed becomes aligned with the needs of the oppressors. This profound change within the black population, as I said, it clearly benefits the white society, was deliberately achieved through a nefarious ideological subversion system deployed by white social engineering scientists and white propaganda designers. Ideological subversion is an offensive psychological warfare tactic that uses misinformation and deception as a weapon to destroy people from within by changing them to think and behave in ways that are against their own self-interest. For some black people, the program is complete. You cannot change their minds, even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is not always right and black is not always bad, you still cannot change their program mindsets. The process is complete and irreversible. That's for some. This ideological subversion system has manipulated black people to such an extent that despite an abundance of available information, no one is able to come to any sensible conclusion in the interest of defending themselves, their families, and their communities. If you're doubting this disclosure, it's because you're very ill-informed or very naive. Because only the very ill-informed or very naive would doubt that the white government would deploy an ideological subversion system against its black population. For it is the inherent duty of the white government to prevent dissent from arising among the subordinate population against the dominant culture. It's deemed as necessary for maintaining the nation's peace and stability. Moreover, given the horrific history shared between the white society and its black population, to not have taken these measures against black people would have placed the white society diametrically against its own self-interest. This practice of manipulating the minds of the oppressed to think in ways beneficial to the dominant culture is not a new one. Throughout history, those empires that were brutally oppressive, fearing eventual retribution from the oppressed, have always manipulated the minds of the oppressed to think in ways that prevent them from unifying against their oppressors. Therefore, the beliefs and perceptions held by the oppressed are never truly their own. They're always falsehoods beneficial to the oppressors that would shrewdly ingrain into the minds of the oppressed by their oppressors without the oppressed even realizing it. This is the hidden reality of what has been done to black people under white dominance. While black people studied religion as if it's true knowledge, white oppressive regimes studied instead how to shape our minds in ways that serve their interests through their monopoly over information that we receive. They use religion to get us to give up our critical thinking skills and replace it with blind faith. So as a result of this, more black people are now more focused on being holy rather than being focused on sharpening our critical thinking skills, which is necessary and essential for emancipating our minds from white mental slavery. Our focus on religions has in fact made us easy victims for those who have studied how to effectively manipulate the human mind. Because most of us have been kept ignorant of the advances made in the field of mass manipulation over the last century, we are therefore easy victims, and we don't understand the ramifications of the psychological warfare tactics that are presently being deployed against us. This ignorance is the white society's greatest power over us. The fact is, because our focus has been directed towards religion, millions of black people, therefore, we lack the intellectual understanding, and we are psychologically blinded from seeing the war that's being waged against us every day. The mere fact that millions of black people now blames our collective condition on a slave syndrome myth and the Stockholm syndrome are absolute proof that most black people are psychologically and intellectually blinded from seeing the real war that's being systematically waged against our minds by white oppressive forces. Black people's collective condition has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth, nor the Stockholm syndrome. We must function based upon what's true, because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our remedies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why those who know must teach. The truth is instead that black people are being deliberately, systematically manipulated to think in ways that serve the white society. Most black people are totally clueless of what's actually being done to us. Case, point, and proof. Most black people know that we're learning more racially affirming facts from each other on social media than we do so within our schools. But most don't know that that's actually a social science tactic that's been put in place for maintaining white social dominance over black people. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide black students with racially affirming facts, as they so routinely does so for white students, is a social science that actually is essential for maintaining white dominance over black people. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over the oppressed population, they must condition the oppressed from a very early age to accept their own subordinate status and to adhere to the authority of the dominant culture. To do so, the education given to the oppressed from the time that their minds are young, palatable, and most impressionable must be the type that denies them of a racially affirming education. When the oppressed are denied access to a racially affirming curriculum during their education and development, this psychologically conditions them to accept their subordinate status within the society. In fact, when the oppressed population are denied a racially affirming curriculum, even the brightest among them may have little, if any, hope of mentally extracting themselves from their assigned feelings of lowness and inferiority within society. Black people are being systematically manipulated to think in ways that serve the white society. Regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the information that a targeted population receives, it's entirely possible to control what they believe. The white society exploits its monopoly of information to shape our minds in ways that serve them. The human mind is actually easy to manipulate when the targeted population is unaware of what's being done to them. Case in point. The reason why the white society exaggerates black crime, that even benefits the white society. Because doing so divides us, shifts black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards ourselves. It also makes us fearful of each other. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions. When one is gripped by fear of a threat, real or imagined, Their rationality and higher cognitive capacity shuts down, making them easily manipulated by anyone who promised them to protect them from the threat. So the white society have us scared of each other, so we believe they're going to save us. Ruling class for 1,000 years have understood the power of intentionally invoking fear in the mind of the subordinate population as a means of control. No passion so effectively robs the mind of all its power of acting and reasoning as fear does. Here's another one. Have you ever noticed that virtually all health study results from white sources favor themselves over black people? That's a social science. Can you not see just how cartoonishly unrealistic this scenario actually is? To consistently have results so one-sidedly favoring one racial group over another, as we're experiencing whites favoring over us, is statistically ridiculous. It's asinine. It's actually fraudulent propaganda that over time is designed to gradually instill the myth of white racial superiority in the collective subconscious minds of black people. When black people constantly receive study results that constantly with whites favoring us, this subliminally conveys the message that the bodies of whites are inherently superior to the bodies of black people. It is not a stretch to draw that conclusion, given the information that's been fed into our minds. It's in fact a normal progressive one. More, the white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality. It is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually a covert, insidious, black racially demoralizing, divide and conquer psychological warfare campaign. Demoralize, divide and conquer is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. It is a well-proven tactic that's been used for centuries by oppressors for controlling the oppressed. This is our reality. This is what's happening to us. This is precisely what's being done to black people. White people control all black mainstream media images, all black statistics, all black societal narratives. The white society therefore literally owns black people's interpretation of ourselves. Fact. You see, we've normalized it. This is a literal fact, means that white people owns our interpretation of ourselves. We were born in the system of slavery, mental slavery, so we've normalized it. White social scientists learned a long time ago that by continuously negatively controlling what black people believe about ourselves, while making us everything about them is positive, it instills a value system in our mind that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. This system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly denigrates the black brand and exalts the white brand. Within this system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda and favorable white propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged or counterbalanced by an equal amount of black racially affirming facts. It conveys a simple message that black people are our own worst enemies and it would therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This programming is extremely effective because when people repeatedly receive the same noted narratives from a trusted media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the black population in terms of our behavior. This is why many black people are now self-hating, perceive ourselves as our own worst enemies. Because with time, being unable to refute the constant negative information about themselves, many black people eventually comes to accept it and internalize it. The constant taunting of negative black propaganda unconsciously influence how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our fellow black people, thus creating division and self-hatred among us. This system of control turns our collective aggressions away from the white society and it redirects it towards ourselves as a means of preventing us from now unifying against the white oppressive society. The basis of this concept of warfare works by affecting the subconscious minds through demoralization. It works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave black people. Those black people who don't critically think, never notices their mental change. This is our reality. The reason why many black people are self-hating, perceive ourselves as their own worst enemy, and revere whites in spite of real history to the contrary, has nothing to do with slave syndrome. It's directly connected to the white society's monopoly over information that is fed into our minds. The human mind like a computer. Regardless, you keep feeding certain information into the mind, and you can steer an entire people towards an objective. The white society exploits its monopoly over information. In fact, they've turned their monopoly over information into their greatest weapon used for controlling black people. This is not some feeble-minded premise, nor is it a silly conspiracy theory, as many of us have been programmed to respond. It's the truth that they hide from you. Social engineering is real. It is a covert-crafted system of control that allows the white ruling class to control the masses and targeted populations. Oppressors always secretly socialize the minds of their oppressed to think in ways that ensure that they never unify and seek retribution against their oppressors. This has been a consistent fact throughout Western history, and it is still especially true now in regard to black people living under white dominance. This is our hidden reality. When we think it is Willie Lynch, they're laughing at us. This psychological warfare system provides the white society with a more proficient method of controlling black people. Because unlike the past blatant racist systems that black people could easily able to identify and therefore develop counter strategies against, this system is not easily recognized nor easily comprehended by its black victims. And we know white racism prevails best when the black victims no longer recognizes it. This psychological warfare program works so well, in fact, that it not only makes black people more compliant with white dominance over our lives, in many cases, it makes black people prefer it. It's at the root of the feelings of self-hatred and division that profoundly affects black people today. It is not, Willie Lynch has never existed. We are not suffering from Willie Lynch. This is why during the 1960s, we were more unified. Why it wasn't affecting us then? Because this system was implemented in 1968. In response to that era black protests. Sadly, the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent words about themselves. Some minds of black people are so programmed that it's easy for black people to continue believing the fraudulent words about themselves than to recognize that they're being brainwashed. We're being systematically manipulated to think in ways that serve the white society. White social scientists describe what's being done to us as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of the subordinate population that makes them adhere to the authority and existing infrastructure of the dominant culture. This is real. Brothers and sisters, we have to wake up from our slumber. We have to realize what's really happening. There's a real war being waged against us. And when we try to liberate ourselves off of a real oppression, utilizing an urban myth and a biblical fairy tale, we are making damn fools of ourselves. We are making damn fools of ourselves. We keep blaming things on Willie Lynch and every day we take our kids to school, not realize what the school is doing to our children. We keep blaming things on Willie Lynch and don't realize what's happening when watching the news media, how our minds have been programmed unrelentingly. We keep saying our plight is religious. We're people in the Bible. That's why we have to persecute like the Pharaoh stories. But that story is a work of fiction written by enemies. Brothers and sisters, it's time to elevate our minds. There are social sciences that are being waged against us. Those of us who tell you the truth are trying to free you from a mental prison you don't even know you're in. Wake up. One love and peace.